Imagine you are standing in a vast, untouched forest, where the shadows seem to breathe and the silence feels heavy with the weight of unseen eyes. For as long as humans have gathered around fires, we have told stories of giant, hair-covered humanoids lurking just beyond the flickering reach of our light. These legends span across continents and cultures, from the high Himalayas to the dense Pacific Northwest, suggesting a global fascination with a creature that defies classification. Is it possible that in the deepest corners of our planet, a relic of our evolutionary past managed to survive the rise of modern industrial civilization? Or are these monsters merely shadows cast by our own minds, reflecting a deep-seated psychological need to believe that the world is still wild and mysterious? Today, we explore the science and the myth of the great ape of the woods, a creature known by many names but defined by one: Bigfoot. To understand why we are so obsessed with this mystery, we first have to look at the massive, empty spaces that still exist on our own maps. While we imagine the world is fully explored, billions of acres of dense woodland remain virtually impenetrable to casual observation and constant human surveillance. This green abyss provides the perfect canvas for our imaginations to paint the things we fear, or perhaps the things we secretly hope still exist. Our story begins not with a blurry photo, but with the fundamental human instinct to find patterns in the chaos of the natural wilderness around us. Throughout history, indigenous cultures like the Coast Salish have spoken of the Sasquatch, a wild man of the woods who exists between the physical and spirit. These oral traditions weren't meant to be campfire scares. They were descriptions of a neighbor, a being that shared the ecosystem long before Europeans arrived. Anthropologists note that these stories often contain specific ecological details, such as the creature's diet, migratory patterns, and its distinct, pungent, musky odor. In the mid-20th century, these localized legends exploded into global pop culture, transforming a spiritual figure into a biological target for modern monster hunters. The term Bigfoot was coined in 1958 after massive footprints were discovered at a construction site in Bluff Creek, California, sparking a media frenzy. Since then, thousands of eyewitness reports have flooded in, describing a bipedal primate standing nearly 8 feet tall with a thick, barrel-shaped chest. Most reports share a haunting similarity: a feeling of being watched, followed by a sudden, bone-chilling whistle or a rhythmic knocking against a tree. Many skeptics dismiss these accounts as simple misidentifications of bears, which can stand on 2 legs and appear strangely humanoid in low-light conditions. However, the sheer volume of sightings across different biomes raises a scientific question. Could a large, undiscovered primate actually find enough food to survive? To answer that, we have to look back millions of years to a time when giant apes were not just legends, but a terrifying reality of Earth. Around 100,000 years ago, our ancestors shared the planet with a biological giant that sounds like something out of a myth. Meet Gigantopithecus blacki, the largest ape to ever walk the Earth, standing nearly 3 meters tall and weighing over 500 kilograms. Found in what is now southern China, this massive primate lived in subtropical forests, munching on bamboo and fruits long before humans dominated. While Gigantopithecus went extinct around 300,000 years ago due to climate change, its existence proves that monstrous primates are a scientific reality. Bigfoot enthusiasts often point to this creature as a possible ancestor, suggesting a small population might have crossed the Bering Land Bridge. It is a romantic idea, a relic of the Pleistocene hiding in the valleys of British Columbia or the peaks of the Cascades. But to survive for thousands of years, a species needs more than just a hiding spot. It needs a breeding population. For a creature the size of Bigfoot, ecologists estimate a minimum viable population would require hundreds, if not thousands, of individual animals. If thousands of giant apes were roaming North America, they would leave behind more than just footprints and scary stories. They would leave a biological trail, bones, teeth, and most importantly, their unique genetic signature in the environment. This brings us to the most famous and controversial piece of evidence in history: the 1967 Patterson-Gimlin film. Shot in Northern California, the grainy footage shows a large, hairy figure walking with a distinct, heavy-strided gait across a sandbar. For decades, experts in biomechanics and Hollywood special effects have debated whether the film shows a biological animal or a man in a suit. Skeptics point to the uncanny valley of the creature's movements, while proponents argue the muscle ripples are too complex for 1960s costumes. Even Dr. Grover Krantz, a physical anthropologist, spent his career arguing that the anatomy of the footprints suggested a unique skeletal structure. He noted that the mid-foot break seen in many tracks is a feature found in great apes but absent in modern humans. Yet, in the age of high-definition cameras and smartphones in every pocket, the clear evidence has stubbornly refused to materialize. Why is it that as our technology gets better, the photos of Bigfoot seem to stay just as blurry as they were in 1967? Perhaps the answer lies not in the woods, but in how our brains process fear and expectation when we enter the wild. To find out, we have to look at the world through the lens of modern genetics and the invisible clues we leave behind. In recent years, a revolutionary tool called environmental DNA, or eDNA, has changed how we hunt for hidden species. Every living thing sheds genetic material, hair, skin, or waste, leaving an invisible trail in the water and the soil. Scientists can now scoop up a liter of river water and identify every fish, mammal, and bird that has touched it. If a massive, bipedal primate were drinking from the streams of the Pacific Northwest, its genetic signature would be there. In 2014, a major study led by Professor Brian Sykes from Oxford University analyzed dozens of hair samples attributed to Bigfoot. The results were definitive, yet disappointing for believers. The hairs belonged to cows, horses, raccoons, and even a rare polar bear. Not a single sample yielded DNA from an unknown primate, suggesting that many physical traces are simply cases of mistaken identity. But why do so many credible people, pilots, park rangers, and experienced outdoorsmen insist they have seen something that shouldn't exist? Psychologists call this expectation bias, where our brains, primed by stories, fill in the gaps of a vague visual stimulus. If you are deep in a dark forest and believe in Bigfoot, a snapping branch isn't just a branch, it's a footstep. Our ancestors survived by being hypersensitive to predators. A false positive sighting of a monster was safer than missing a real tiger. This evolutionary hardware makes us prone to pareidolia, the tendency to see meaningful shapes like faces or bodies in random patterns. Furthermore, the phenomenon of the shadow of the woods is amplified by the physical effects of extreme isolation on the human mind. Low-frequency sounds, known as infrasound, can be generated by wind through trees and are known to cause feelings of dread and hallucinations. To a lone hiker, a natural acoustic anomaly might feel like the menacing presence often described in Bigfoot encounters. If Bigfoot is a psychological phantom, it is one of the most successful and persistent phantoms in human history. Yet, science remains open to the possibility of cryptic species, animals that are real but look nearly identical to known ones. We are still discovering new species of primates today, such as the Popa langur in Myanmar, identified only in 2020. However, there is a massive difference between a small, shy monkey in a remote jungle and an 800-pound giant in North America. The search for Bigfoot eventually leads us to a crossroads where biology meets our deepest emotional needs. If Bigfoot were real, it would need to occupy a specific ecological niche, acting as a top-tier omnivore within its habitat. In the Pacific Northwest, this would mean competing for calories with grizzly bears, wolves, and mountain lions in a harsh environment. A creature of that size would require roughly 5,000 to 8,000 calories every single day just to maintain its body weight. This constant search for food, berries, elk, salmon, and roots would inevitably bring it into contact with human infrastructure or trail cameras. Yet, despite the deployment of thousands of motion-activated cameras by researchers, we have zero high-resolution photos of an unknown primate. We have captured images of the world's rarest snow leopards and elusive deep-sea squids, yet the North American ape remains invisible. Biologists argue that a large mammal cannot simply vanish without leaving behind a kill site or a winter nesting ground. Bears leave claw marks on trees and distinct scat. If Bigfoot exists, why has no hunter ever stumbled upon a skeleton? Some suggest that Bigfoot might bury its dead, a behavior seen in humans and hinted at in some highly intelligent elephant groups. While burial would explain the lack of bones, it would also imply a level of social complexity and culture akin to early hominids. This leads to a fascinating middle ground, the possibility that we aren't looking for a monster but a very shy, primitive cousin. Our own evolutionary tree is messy, filled with ghost lineages, branches of humanity that lived alongside us before fading into history. Species like the Denisovans or Homo floresiensis survived much longer than we once thought, often in isolated geographical pockets. Could a small group of hominids have adapted to the boreal forests, developing a nocturnal and ultra-cautious lifestyle to avoid us? It is a compelling what-if, but the fossil record for North American primates is famously, and frustratingly, empty. Evolutionarily speaking, primates are tropical animals, and the journey across the icy Beringia land bridge would have been a brutal filter. To survive that trek, a creature would need mastered fire, tailored clothing, or a biological miracle of cold weather adaptation. This is where the legend often breaks away from biology, as enthusiasts move toward increasingly supernatural explanations for the creature. When the physical evidence fails, some turn to interdimensional theories, suggesting the creature blinks in and out of our reality. But as soon as we step away from biology, we leave the realm of science and enter the realm of pure human mythology. If we cannot find a body, we must look at the impact a giant primate would have on its environment. Large animals are ecological engineers. Elephants knock over trees, and wolves change the flow of rivers by managing prey. If Bigfoot were real, we would expect to see structure in the forest deliberately snap trees or woven branch nests. Many researchers point to tree peaks and X formations as evidence of territorial marking by an intelligent, non-human hand. However, foresters often explain these as snow loading or natural deadfalls, where gravity and wind mimic the look of design. This is the central frustration of the Bigfoot mystery. Every piece of evidence has a perfectly mundane, natural alternative. A blurry photo could be a bear, a strange howl could be a loon or a coyote, a footprint could be an eroded human track. This brings us to the hoaxer's prophet, the reality that some of the most famous evidence was created by humans for fame or money. In 2002, the family of Ray Wallace revealed that their father had used wooden feet to create tracks in 1958, starting the Bigfoot craze. Even the Patterson-Gimlin film, though never proven a hoax, exists in a world where people are incentivized to deceive. But a hoax requires a human, and many sightings happen in places so remote that the hoaxer would be risking their life for no audience. This suggests that while some are lying, many others are experiencing something truly profound, even if it isn't biological. Could it be that Bigfoot is a living myth, a personification of the wilderness that our psyche creates to deal with the vast unknown? In the modern world, we have conquered the night with LEDs and mapped the globe with GPS, leaving no room for the monster. Perhaps we keep Bigfoot alive because we are terrified of a world that is completely explained, sanitized, and devoid of magic. As the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche once warned, if we kill all the monsters, we might lose the hero inside ourselves too. Yet, the scientific community hasn't completely closed the door. The search for relict hominoids continues in the fringes of academia. Some researchers use statistical likelihood models to predict where an undiscovered large mammal could realistically hide today. These models highlight regions like the Himalayas or the deep Amazon, where the terrain is a fortress of vertical cliffs and thick canopy. But North America is different. It is crisscrossed by millions of miles of roads and monitored by constant satellite imaging. Despite our satellites and road networks, North America contains the Great Green Wall of the Boreal Forest, stretching across Canada. This ecosystem is so vast and sparsely populated that it could theoretically hide an army of giants without a single human ever noticing. If we look at the Mapinguari of the Amazon, we find another legend of a giant, hairy creature with a thick, impenetrable hide. Some paleontologists have suggested that these stories might be cultural memories of the Megatherium or giant ground sloth. These massive beasts were as tall as houses and lived alongside early humans before disappearing around 10,000 years ago. It is a haunting thought that a species can go extinct in the physical world but live on for millennia in the stories of its survivors. This leads us to the Lazarus taxon, the scientific term for a species that disappears from the fossil record only to be found alive. The coelacanth fish was thought to have died out with the dinosaurs 66 million years ago until one was caught in 1938. If a 6-foot fish can hide in the depths of the ocean for millions of years, why couldn't a primate hide in the mountains? The difference lies in the metabolic cost of being a large mammal versus a cold-blooded fish in a stable, deep-sea environment. Primates are expensive to run. They need constant heat, high-energy food, and social interaction to raise their slow-growing young. This biological reality is the strongest argument against a breeding population of Bigfoot existing in the modern United States. However, the absence of evidence is not necessarily the evidence of absence, a mantra often repeated by the hopeful. We must also consider the tulpa effect, the idea that if enough people believe in something, it takes on a life of its own. Bigfoot has become a cultural icon, a symbol of environmental preservation and the untamed spirit of the wild frontier. In many ways, Bigfoot is more real as a symbol than it could ever be as a flesh-and-blood animal in a cage. The mystery keeps our curiosity alive, forcing us to look closer at the footprints in the mud and the sounds in the night. Every year, new unexplained audio recordings of howls and wood knocks are uploaded to the internet for public scrutiny. Scientists analyze these frequencies, often finding they match known animals, but occasionally they encounter a sound that defies a match. These anomalies are the sparks that keep the fire of the legend burning, even in the cold light of the 21st century. If Bigfoot represents our hope for a wild world, the Yeti of the Himalayas represents our fear of the cold, inhospitable peaks. High-altitude climbers have reported tracks in the snow for over a century, calling them the footprints of the abominable snowman. In 2017, a comprehensive DNA study published in the journal Proceedings of the Royal Society B analyzed 9 Yeti bone and fur samples. The results were scientifically crushing. 8 samples were from local bears, and 1 was from a dog. This suggests that the Yeti, like its North American cousin, is a biological composite of real animals and human imagination. But why does our imagination consistently build the same shape, a giant, bipedal, hairy man-beast? Evolutionary biologists suggest this is anthropomorphism, where we project human traits onto the environment to make it less terrifying. By giving the unknown a face and a name, we can categorize it, hunt it, or even protect it. This psychological safety net allows us to venture into the wilderness without feeling like we are entirely alone or helpless. However, the wild man myth also touches on our deep-seated guilt about what we have done to our own evolutionary relatives. For hundreds of thousands of years, the Earth was home to multiple species of humans, all living and breathing at the same time. We outcompeted, absorbed, or perhaps even eliminated our cousins, like the Neanderthals and the Denisovans. Could Bigfoot be a ghost of the genus Homo, a manifestation of the collective trauma of being the last human species standing? When we look for Bigfoot, we might actually be looking for our lost family, searching for a mirror in the dark woods. This brings us to a strange paradox. As we destroy the natural world, the sightings of Bigfoot seem to increase, not decrease. Perhaps the monster is a defense mechanism for the forest, a phantom that keeps humans from intruding too deeply into the last sanctuaries. In some US states, like Washington, Bigfoot is officially protected by local ordinances, even though the law protects a creature that doesn't exist. This is precautionary conservation. Protecting the habitat of a legend effectively protects thousands of real, endangered species. In this way, Bigfoot has become the ultimate umbrella species, shielding the ecosystem with the power of its own myth. But as we peel back the layers of the mystery, we must ask, what happens if we actually find what we're looking for? If a biological Bigfoot were finally captured, the mystery that has fueled our imaginations for centuries would vanish instantly. The creature would cease to be a legend and become a specimen, a subject for blood tests, brain scans, and genetic sequencing. We would likely find that it is a remarkable primate, but one bound by the same physical limits as every other animal. It would no longer be the lord of the woods, but a vulnerable population requiring expensive, high-stakes government intervention. In this sense, the discovery of Bigfoot might be the greatest tragedy to ever befall the species and our culture. We are a species that thrives on the unsolved, using the gaps in our knowledge to build stories that give our lives meaning. This is why cryptozoology, the study of hidden animals, remains so popular despite its lack of peer-reviewed successes. It is not just about the animals, it is about the thrill of the hunt and the belief that we haven't seen everything yet. Think of the vast blue holes in the ocean or the uncontacted tribes in the deep folds of the Amazon rainforest. These places represent the frontier, a boundary between the world we control and the world that still belongs to nature. Every time science proves a monster doesn't exist, the frontier shrinks and the world feels a little bit smaller and more crowded. But science also gives us new monsters to marvel at, from the microscopic tardigrades to the colossal black holes in deep space. Perhaps Bigfoot is simply a placeholder for the giant unknown, a shape we use until science provides a more complex truth. Even Jane Goodall, the world's most famous primatologist, once remarked that she wouldn't be surprised if such a creature existed. Her curiosity wasn't based on proof, but on a deep respect for the surprises that the natural world still has in store for us. This informed hope is the bridge that allows scientists and dreamers to stand on the same mountain, looking into the same valley. We must also consider that we are currently living through the 6th mass extinction, where species are vanishing faster than we can name them. In such a world, the idea of a giant ape thriving in secret is a powerful rebellion against the reality of environmental collapse. Bigfoot is the survivor we all want to be: independent, untraceable, and completely at home in the wild. As we move deeper into the digital age, the wild man remains our last tether to a prehistoric version of ourselves. Ultimately, the question of whether Bigfoot is a biological reality or a psychological shadow may be missing the point entirely. We live in an era where we can peer into the heart of distant galaxies and edit the very code of life itself. Yet, we still find ourselves staring into the tree line at dusk, wondering if something larger than us is staring back. This persistent curiosity is a testament to the human spirit, a refusal to accept that the world is a finished book. Science tells us that a 1,000-pound primate in the woods is highly improbable, nearly impossible by every metric of biology. But science also teaches us that the improbable is the foundation of our existence, from the Big Bang to the spark of life. If we ever truly prove that the woods are empty, we lose a piece of our childhood wonder, a part of our ancient identity. We need the mystery to remind us that we are not the masters of everything, but merely a part of a much larger story. The wild man is a mirror reflecting our own duality, our animal past, and our technological, often disconnected, present. Whether he is made of flesh and bone or dreams and wood smoke, Bigfoot is the guardian of the world's last secrets. He represents the 10% of the map that remains uncolored, the deep valleys where the GPS signal finally dies. As long as there are places where the light doesn't reach and the wind sounds like a voice, the legend will survive. Perhaps the true value of Bigfoot isn't in finding him, but in the search itself, the journey into the quiet, dark places. It forces us to walk softer, listen closer, and respect the vast ecosystems that we so often take for granted. So, the next time you find yourself in a deep forest and hear a branch snap just out of sight, don't be afraid. Instead, feel grateful that there is still something in this world that can make your heart race and your mind wander. Is he out there, hidden in the green abyss, watching us with ancient, knowing eyes as we stumble through his home? Or is he the ghost of the wild, calling us back to a time when we were more connected to the earth? We may never know for certain, and perhaps, for the sake of our own wonder, that is exactly how it should stay. After all, what is a world without monsters but a world without the possibility of something truly wonderful?